Imagine flying at 20,000 feet, the freezing wind battering a thin aluminum skin, engines roaring so loudly you feel it in your bones, and knowing that the single object sitting in the glass nose of your bomber, a device no bigger than a sewing machine, is supposedly so precise it could drop a bomb into a pickle barrel. That device was the Norden Bombsight, one of the most legendary, mysterious, overhyped, and misunderstood inventions of the Second World War. This is its story, a story of promises, illusions, secrecy, triumphs, failures, and the human factor that no machine could ever fully control. The myth of the Norden Bombsight begins long before American bombers crossed the skies over Europe. In the years leading up to the war, the U.S. Army Air Corps invested heavily in the idea of daylight precision bombing. This doctrine promised that, rather than destroying entire cities, expertly trained American crews could strike factories, rail yards, submarine pens, and oil refineries with surgical accuracy. To make that vision real, they needed a device capable of compensating for altitude, wind drift, aircraft movement, target motion, and ballistic trajectory, all at once and all in real time. They needed a miracle, and for a moment it seemed like they had one. Enter Carl Norden, a Dutch-born engineer with a stubborn streak and an obsession with mechanical perfection. Norden believed that with enough gears, gyroscopes, and mathematical logic built into a machine, he could eliminate human error. His bombsight, a complex analog computer in a metal casing, did something revolutionary. Once the bombardier fed it wind speed, altitude, airspeed, and other variables, the device actually took control of the aircraft, guiding it gently left or right, up or down, to put the bomber on the mathematically perfect release path. Then, at just the right moment, the bombsight would automatically release the bombs. To military leaders, this sounded like magic. To politicians, it sounded like salvation. And to the American public, once the details were released after the war, it sounded like a technological triumph that put the United States a full generation ahead of its enemies. But long before anyone outside a select circle even knew the Norden existed, it had already become the most guarded secret in American aviation. Bombardiers were trained with an almost religious intensity. They were instructed never to let the device fall into enemy hands. At training bases, they marched with their bombsight inside a padlocked briefcase chained to their wrists. In combat zones, the Norden was stored under armed guard. If a bomber was going down over enemy territory, bombardiers were ordered to destroy the device with an axe, grenades, or gunfire. Some crews practiced emergency drills where the bombsight was tossed out the hatch into the sea rather than risk capture. It is no exaggeration to say that the U.S. military treated the Norden bombsight with the same secrecy and paranoia later reserved for nuclear weapons. So did the Norden really work? Was it truly capable of dropping a bomb into a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet? Well, yes and no. Under perfect test range conditions, with stable weather, predictable winds, no enemy fire, and a calm, level flight path, highly trained bombardiers did achieve extraordinary accuracy. On test ranges, hit probabilities within a few dozen feet were common. The legend grew rapidly. Some claimed 3 feet, some claimed 20, others claimed the mythical pickle barrel. And in the tightly controlled world of pre-war testing, the device's accuracy was indeed jaw-dropping, far beyond anything other nations had achieved. But combat is not a test range. Combat is chaos. At 20,000 feet over Europe, a bomber wasn't flying in clean textbook conditions. It was punching through flak bursts, evasive winds, thick cloud layers, jarring turbulence, and streams of enemy fighters slashing through formation. The aircraft shook, bucked, and vibrated. The bombardier's hands were freezing. His oxygen mask was frosting over. His view of the target was often obscured by smoke, haze, and weather. And if the formation was slightly off course, even by a degree or two, the bombsight could do nothing to fix that until it had full control of the plane. But in formation, the bombardier rarely had true control. He had to stay locked with dozens of other aircraft. This meant the Norden often became an instrument of theoretical precision rather than practical precision. The U.S. 8th Air Force, operating out of England, discovered the brutal truth quickly. Early missions against targets in Germany, especially the catastrophic raid on Schweinfurt-Regensburg, showed that even with the Norden, only a small percentage of bombs fell within 1,000 feet of the target. Imagine that, a device sold as capable of hitting a barrel, struggling to consistently hit something the size of a city block. Yet even with those limitations, the Norden wasn't a failure, far from it. When conditions were good, when formations held steady, when weather cooperated, and when bombardiers were experienced, the device allowed American forces to strike with a level of precision unmatched by Axis air forces. It was the best bomb sight of the war, by a wide margin. It helped cripple Germany's synthetic oil production, devastated key industrial areas, suppressed U-boat pens, and damaged rail networks that were crucial to the German war effort. The legend was exaggerated, but not invented out of thin air. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Norden Bombsight story is how human it ultimately was. Despite being a machine built on mathematical precision, it depended entirely on human skill. A top-tier bombardier could make the Norden sing, adjusting inputs with lightning reflexes, interpreting data through instinct and experience, and timing corrections with surgical finesse. These bombardiers became masters of an art form that blended mathematics, physics, observation, and nerves of steel. Some earned reputations throughout their groups. Crews trusted them with their lives. Commanders built mission planning around them. But even the best bombardiers could do little when cloud cover rolled in, flak shook the aircraft apart, or smoke filled the target area. Enemy forces understood this too. That's why German flak batteries focused on breaking up bomber formations and forcing them off their calculated course. That's why German commanders maintained dense smoke screens over industrial centers, generating thick clouds that blinded the bomb sight. That's why fighters attacked formations aggressively during the bomb run, knowing that even a small disruption in the bomber's flight path could render the Norden useless. The bomb sight also had vulnerabilities that are often overlooked. It didn't perform well in extremely high winds. It struggled with ground haze. It required specific approach angles that could be predicted by defenders. And because American doctrine relied on tight formations, the lead bombardier, not each aircraft individually, typically controlled the drop. Dozens of planes released their payloads at once, using the lead plane's Norden solution, meaning even minor deviations multiplied across the formation. Still, despite all of this, the Norden bombsight played a monumental role in shaping the U.S. approach to the war. Its presence justified daylight raids, and its promise fueled the belief that strategic bombing could break the enemy's war machine without resorting to wholesale destruction of civilian centers. Whether that belief was realistic is still debated by historians, but there is no denying that the Norden shaped strategy at the highest levels. One lesser-known chapter in this story is how the bombsight gave birth to a kind of mystique inside bomber crews. Bombardiers treated the device with reverence. Some gave their bombsights nicknames. Others spoke about it like a living companion, a machine they had to care for, understand, and trust. In the cold nose of a B-17 or B-24, the bombardier sat alone with the device, shielded from the rest of the crew by a curtain during classified briefings. Pilots joked, sometimes bitterly, that the bombardier was the real boss during the final minutes before release. Even enemy forces were fascinated by the Norden. German intelligence spent years attempting to obtain one. They even managed to recruit a spy, Hermann W. Lang, who helped the Nazis build an approximate copy. But they never fully cracked the system, and their bomb sights remained inferior. Ironically, the Soviets, allies of the United States, also captured a Norden through post-war intelligence operations and reverse-engineered their own version. By the time the Cold War was underway, the Norden bombsight had become an international prize. Yet as technology evolved, the device that once inspired awe rapidly became obsolete. Radar improved, bombing altitudes increased, jet aircraft and guided munitions emerged. By the Korean War, the Norden was still in use but already outdated. By Vietnam, laser guidance had begun to take center stage. Today, the Norden bombsight is a museum piece, a relic from a time when analog ingenuity stood at the pinnacle of aerial warfare. So did it really drop a bomb into a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet? In perfect conditions, maybe. In war? Almost never. But the legend persists because it represented something larger. The belief that technology could tame the chaos of war, that precision could replace destruction, and that accuracy could save lives. It was a beautiful idea, flawed, hopeful, and deeply human. And the true measure of the Norden Bombsight isn't the size of the target it could hit, but the massive impact it had on strategy, doctrine, aviation technology, and the men who relied on it. It was a machine that changed how America fought a war, even if it never lived up to its most famous promise. But to understand the real impact of the Norden Bombsight, we have to appreciate what came before it. Before Norden, bombing from high altitude was closer to guesswork than science. Crews looked through simple optical sights, judged wind drift by eyeballing smoke on the ground, and dropped their bombs manually based on experience or instinct. Accuracy was measured in miles, not feet. During World War I, bombers often hit the wrong city entirely. Even into the 1920s and 1930s, hitting a moving ship from altitude was considered almost impossible. Military planners around the world knew that if strategic bombing was ever going to work, something revolutionary had to change. The Norden Bombsight was that revolution. And yet, the bombsight alone was not enough. Precision was a chain with many links, and every link had to hold. The aircraft needed to reach the target intact. The formation had to stay tight. The lead bombardier had to have a clear view. Weather conditions needed to cooperate. The approach angle had to be correct. The gyros had to be calibrated. The bomb release had to be timed perfectly. And above all, the crew had to trust the machine, even when fear, fatigue, or instinct told them otherwise. One story often told by veterans illustrates this perfectly. On a mission over Germany, a bombardier named Lieutenant Donald Porter was preparing for the bomb run when heavy flak slammed into his B-17, shaking it violently. Splinters of metal ripped through the nose, punching holes in the fuselage. Vision blurred as the aircraft bucked under the impact. Porter fought to keep his eye on the crosshairs, adjusting the Norden as the pilot struggled to maintain altitude. Despite the chaos, the bombsight indicated it could still deliver an accurate solution. Against his instincts, Porter trusted the machine. He made the final corrections, held the aircraft steady, and released the bombs automatically through the Norden. After the mission, reconnaissance photos showed that Porter's bombs had hit the target area dead on, even though the rest of the formation had been scattered by flak. His accuracy wasn't a miracle. It was the result of training, experience, and a deep understanding of what the bombsight could and could not do. But for every mission like Porter's, there were dozens where conditions were hopeless. Cloud cover was the single greatest enemy of the Norden bombsight. Over Europe, clouds frequently obscured targets, forcing crews to rely on dead reckoning or secondary visual cues. Sometimes entire bomber groups would make the journey to Germany only to turn back at the last moment because the target was invisible. When forced to guess, accuracy plummeted. Bombs fell miles away from the intended target, sometimes striking civilian areas or open countryside. These failures are a crucial part of the Norden's legacy because they reveal the gap between theory and practice, and the uncomfortable truth that no matter how brilliant the technology, war is inherently resistant to perfect solutions. Strategic bombing doctrine itself was shaped, for better or worse, by faith in the Norden. U.S. air planners believed that precision could break the industrial backbone of the Axis without the need for indiscriminate destruction. In practice, achieving that level of precision required enormous effort, staggering losses, and often, results that fell short of expectations. Yet over time, the cumulative effect of repeated attacks on oil refineries, ball-bearing factories, transportation hubs, and industrial complexes did cripple the German war economy. Not with pickle barrel accuracy, but with relentless pressure applied again and again by thousands of bombers carrying devices that were, at the time, the most advanced in the world. There is also a human cost woven into this story. Bombing crews were young, often between 18 and 25. They were asked to climb into freezing metal aircraft, fly for hours through hostile skies, and then perform calculations under conditions that would make a mathematician dizzy. Their lives depended on oxygen masks that froze solid, on engines that could fail at any moment, and on a bombsight that had become a symbol of American ingenuity. Bombardiers trained for months to understand every nuance of the device. They practiced adjusting for wind drift, calibrating gyros, and estimating ground speed by tracking landmarks. They learned to enter data quickly and accurately into a machine that punished even small mistakes. And they practiced doing all of this under time pressure, knowing that the success of the mission, and often the safety of the formation, depended on their performance during the final seconds before release, because the final seconds were everything. As the bomber approached the target, the bombardier would take control of the aircraft through the bombsight's connection to the autopilot. Pilots relinquished control reluctantly, knowing their fate was now literally in the hands of the man in the nose. The bombardier's voice became the guiding force in the cockpit. Steady, steady, left 2 degrees, hold it, bomb bay doors open. And then, with a final moment of quiet focus, the Norden Bombsight would release the bombs automatically. In that instant, the tension inside the aircraft snapped, replaced by a mixture of relief, adrenaline, and dread, because every man on board knew the worst part of the mission was ahead, getting out alive. But while the Norden dominated American air strategy, not everyone believed it was the future. Critics argued that daylight precision bombing and the Norden Bombsight that supported it placed too much faith in technology. They pointed out that British forces under Air Marshal Arthur Harris had abandoned daylight raids in favor of nighttime area bombing because they believed achieving precision at high altitude was impossible. They argued that the American approach ignored the reality of weather, flak, and fighter resistance. Yet even with these criticisms, the Norden Bombsight remained central to American doctrine. It was, after all, the best tool available, a tool simultaneously brilliant and flawed. The story of the Norden also reveals something fascinating about wartime innovation, how myths shape reality. The bombsight's reputation for pinpoint accuracy encouraged political leaders to allocate resources to strategic bombing campaigns. It influenced public support for the air war. It shaped the morale of bomber crews, who needed to believe that their missions were making a difference, and it even inspired enemy efforts to counter it. Germany developed specialized smoke generators, camouflage techniques, and decoy targets specifically designed to blind the Norden. In large industrial areas, enormous smoke pots were lit to cover factories in thick clouds. Oil facilities were painted to blend with surrounding terrain. Decoy towns and fake targets were constructed to lure bombers away from real industrial centers. The battle of technology became as important as the battle of guns and aircraft. Yet the most compelling part of the Norden Bombsight's legacy is how profoundly it influenced the evolution of aerial warfare long after World War II ended. The lessons learned from the Norden shaped the development of radar bombing, inertial navigation, and eventually, precision-guided munitions. The idea that a single device could calculate a ballistic trajectory in real time laid the groundwork for automated targeting systems. Many of the engineers who worked on the Norden went on to contribute to early missile guidance and navigation technologies. The bombsight itself was used in modified forms during the Korean War and even early in the Vietnam War, long after it had been surpassed technologically. It became a stepping stone, a bridge between the era of mechanical calculation and the era of computerized guidance. And perhaps that is the best way to understand the Norden Bombsight. Not as a perfect device or as a miracle of accuracy, but as a symbol of transition, a symbol of humanity's attempt to impose order on the chaos of war, a symbol of ingenuity, ambition, and the eternal struggle to create machines capable of solving human problems with precision. Because the truth is simple, the Norden Bombsight was both better and worse than the myth suggests. It was a marvel of engineering, but not magic. It was capable of impressive accuracy, but not infallible. It performed brilliantly in controlled tests, yet struggled under battlefield conditions. It was treasured, guarded, and trusted, yet often betrayed by weather, enemy fire, or the fragility of mechanical systems pushed to their limits. Still, its impact was undeniable. It allowed American forces to strike strategic targets with unprecedented effectiveness. It contributed to the eventual collapse of German industry. It set the stage for modern aerial warfare. And perhaps most importantly, it represents a chapter in history where humans placed immense hope in a machine. And that machine, despite its flaws, helped change the course of a global conflict. So the next time you hear someone repeat the old line that the Norden bombsight could drop a bomb into a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet, remember the truth behind the myth. Yes, the Norden was an extraordinary piece of engineering. Yes, it pushed the boundaries of what was possible. But the pickle barrel legend endures because it captures the spirit of an era, a belief that precision could win wars, that technology could overcome chaos, and that a determined crew, guided by a brilliant machine, could make a difference against impossible odds. In the end, the Norden bombsight was never just a device. It was a promise that war could be made cleaner, more precise, and less destructive. A promise that was only partially fulfilled, but deeply influential. A promise that continues to echo through the history of aviation and military technology. And even today, sitting behind museum glass, the Norden still has the power to inspire. Not because it was perfect, but because it was bold, because it dared to solve a problem that had defeated generations before it. Because it represents the moment when the sky ceased to be a place of blind destruction and became, for the first time, a domain where accuracy mattered, where a machine could help shape the outcome of a war, one bomb run at a time.